Hi, everyone. So there is a chapter in the Old Testament that I've wanted to go over a very long time, and it's one that takes some time. So I've decided to break it down into two parts. And the chapter is Isaiah 53, and it is a chapter that is all about Yeshua. This was written 700 years before Jesus even appeared on earth, and it just shows how significant this prophecy is. So I'm going to read Isaiah 53 verses 1 through 6, and then I'm going to go to the New Testament to show how they were all fulfilled 700 years later. Who has believed our message? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of parched ground. He has no stately form or majesty that we should look upon him, nor appearance that we should be attracted to him. He was despised and forsaken of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and like one from whom men hide their face. He was despised, and we did not esteem him. Surely our griefs he himself bore, and our sorrows he carried. Yet we ourselves esteemed him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was pierced through for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The chastening for our well-being fell upon him, and by his scourging we are healed. All of us, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way. But the Lord has caused the iniquity of us all to fall on him. And all this is, again, talking about Yeshua, Jesus. So I'm going to go to the New Testament and show how these were fulfilled in Jesus's life. So I'm going to John 12. I'm going to read verses 37 through 38. And this has to do with people just not believing. So it says, "But though he had performed so many signs before them, yet they were not believing in him, that the word of Isaiah the prophet might be fulfilled, which he spoke, Lord, who has believed our report, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed?" So this is Isaiah 53:1. And while the language isn't exactly the same, it's partly having to do with how it was written versus, Hebrew versus Aramaic versus Greek. But it's the same thing. It's the whole idea that nobody believed. And I mean, granted, some did, but the overall concept is about people not believing in Jesus. And then I'm going to just in Isaiah 53:2, where it just talks about how, nobody was really attracted to him. There's really no verses in the New Testament that specifically says that, but it's very clear as you read the New Testament that he was really just an average looking man. There are times especially in the Old Testament, a few times where it was pointed out that somebody was handsome. Like King Saul, he was handsome. David was handsome. So it actually, the Bible didn't just ignore people's looks. But in this case, it shows that Yeshua was just looking like everybody else. So there was nothing specific about how he looked that made people be attracted to him. Okay, and then I'm going to go to, so in Isaiah 53:3, it talks about him being despised. So I'm going to read, I wrote out John 7, verse 7, and it says, "The world cannot hate you." This is Jesus talking. "But it hates me because I testify of it that its deeds are evil." Then I'm going to read John 15. And I'm going to read 18 and 25. So 18 says, "If the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you." And then verse 25, he said, "But they have done this in order that the word may be fulfilled that is written in their law. They hated me without a cause." And that was in one of the Psalms. So for all the good that Yeshua did, the miracles and the signs and just the kindness and the love that he gave to people, it was still showing that there were many that still despised him, and especially the religious people, the ones who thought they were following the law, but they weren't following the law of the heart of love. And that is what Yeshua was all about. So he was despised by so many, which is why he ended up, being on the cross. And then in Isaiah 53, verses 4 through 5, it talks about how he bore our griefs. So John 19, and I think I'll read 31 through 34. It says, "The Jews, therefore, because it was the day of preparation, so that the body should not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for that Sabbath was a high day, they asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away." So this is dealing with not just Yeshua, but the two thieves that were crucified with him. So the soldiers therefore came and broke the legs of the first man and of the other man who was crucified with him. So that's talking about the two thieves. But coming to Jesus, when they saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately there came out blood and water. He was pierced through for our transgressions. And another word that was used that it really got to me is about how he was crushed for our iniquities. And when I looked that up in the Hebrew, it's so brutal because it talks about being beaten basically to a pulp, which is really what happened with Yeshua. He was beaten to almost beyond recognition. The scourging and all that they did to him. And it talks about being humbled and contrite. And that's really where they felt they put Yeshua. They thought they had humbled him. And the idea also of being dejected and sad. And when Yeshua was in the Garden of Gethsemane, I think he felt dejected because he couldn't, at that time, the weight was so heavy on him about what he was about to do that he was so in distress that angels had to come and help him. He was dejected and he was sad because he knew that he had to leave, even though he knew also that he was going to be raised. It's such a dichotomy there of him feeling the human dejection and sadness, but the divine knowing that he was saving the world by being crushed. But it is really such a visual when you really think about how Yeshua allowed himself to be crushed for our sin that we have committed and that he died to save us from. I don't know, that's just, wow. And then in Isaiah 53:6, it's just talking about how, we've all gone astray. So I'm going to go to Romans 3, and I'm going to read verse 10 through 12. And this was actually quotes from Psalm 43, 1 through 3, and Psalm 53, 1 through 3. "As it is written, there is none righteous, not even one. There is none who understands. There is none who seeks for God. All have turned aside together. They have become useless. There is none who does good. There is not even one." Not one person does good because we have all sinned. And actually, I was going to go there. So let me go to Romans 3:23. And that's exactly what it says. "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." All of us, we're all born in sin. And I've said this before, we don't want to hear it. We don't want to think it because we think we're good people. But none of us are good, because good in this context and in the context of the Bible is perfection. And none of us are perfect. And that's why we need Jesus. That is why we need a Savior. And then in verse 6, talking about how all the sins fell on him. 1 Corinthians 5:21 says this. "He made him," so Jehovah God made him, Yeshua, "who knew no sin, to be sin on our behalf, that we might become the righteousness of God in him." So this is kind of where part 1 is. But we all sinned, and all of it came upon Yeshua on the cross. And it was all so that we could have the righteousness of God in us when we accept him. So I am praying today that you'll think about this and think about what Yeshua did for you, how he was crushed for your iniquity so that you could have the righteousness of God in you. So I pray that you will allow that righteousness to come into you today. Have a blessed day.